My name is Daniel Glaser, and I work on the brain through neuroscience research and through engagement with different public views of what thinking is. Welcome to my exp. So this is an exploration of neuroscience, and if we unpack the word neuroscience, there is neuro and science. It's a scientific explanation, and it's principally a biological story that we're telling in neuroscience as opposed to psychology or other domains. And the neuro piece is about neurons. So neuron is a class of cell within the body, and the purpose of a neuron is really to transmit information. So you can think about it as a relay. Most neurons, almost all neurons, have got a cell body, which is like the body of most other cells, but they have other processes, other elements that are often elongated, as if they were wires, and they generally have outputs, which are they send information, and they have inputs. And the world from the perspective of a neuron is a bunch of inputs that come into it. It does some sort of, I think we can say, computation. It adds them up or compares them to something. And then if it's satisfied with the answer, it will fire an output. And I say fire because neurons use electrical signaling to send information along these processes, these wires, the axons, the output neurons. But they also use chemistry because where they interface with each other, where they join, there's a chemical junction. So electricity is part of the story. Some neurons send electrical signals quite fast and some quite slow. But chemistry is also part of the story because the soup within which the neuron is bathed affects its processing. So it can get signals and information from hormones and chemicals in the area, and hormones can affect the junction between neurons. So a neuron is a biological signaling device, but the way that they're used, the way they're assembled, the way they function within biology is really to maintain one of the most fundamental biological properties, and that's homeostasis. So what's homeostasis? Biological systems largely like to maintain themselves by contrast with their environments. So for example, if you're a warm-blooded creature, you try to maintain your own temperature by contrast with the temperature outside. If it's hot, you might sweat. If it's cold, you might shiver. And that allows you to maintain your temperature. And in fact, the whole nervous system, arguably, is about trying to predict differences or changes in the environment, to respond to those, to allow the organism to survive. And that's as true of a small, tiny mollusk creature that can sense the world outside and retract its feel as if there's a noxious, a poisonous thing, or envelop the things around it and eat them and ingest them. It's using signaling to detect what's out there, to make predictions about what will happen, and to allow it to function better as a result. Now, the interesting thing about these predictions, this homeostasis, is that biology and neurobiology seems to work in layers. Now, interestingly, of course, we do very sophisticated movements, hand movements, gestures, ballet, playing musical instruments. But all of those processes are layered on top of the circuitry which we share with what we would say are more primitive animals. We're spending all of our time as humans running simulations of what we think the systems within us are going to do. I'll give you another example. Quite a hot day in London today. And sometimes I feel thirsty. What is this thirst that I feel? Well, my blood has got various chemicals in it, and they need to be in quite a good balance in order for me to function optimally. If I become dehydrated, then the concentration of certain salts in my bloodstream might increase, and I have detectors which allow my brain to sense when those salts are out of balance. Very good. Those signals go to a place in my brain called the hypothalamus, one of the brainstem nuclei, which we'll talk about in a second. And that signal suggests that I ought to get some water on board to continue to function optimally. So I might reach and have a drink. I have a sensation of thirst, which makes me reach to drink. And when I've drunk a glass of water, in many cases, the thirst will go away. I've drunk enough. On a very hot day, if I've been very sweaty and got rid of lots of liquid, after my first glass of water, I may discover that I'm still thirsty. So I'll reach for the tap, refill, and have a second glass. Seems very natural. But here's the interesting piece. After the first glass of water that I've drunk, the water itself is still going down my esophagus. It hasn't reached my stomach, yet alone my bloodstream. So the signal that made me thirsty, this chemical imbalance, is still there. It's still the case that my salts are out of whack. So how do I know or decide whether to drink more? The answer is that my brain is running a simulation of my body inside itself. The brain is predicting the effect of this glass of water on the body and predicting whether or not there's going to have been enough drunk. If we look down into the billions of neurons in our brain, we can see differences. We can see how each one functions. And in fact, even to simulate a single neuron would take a huge amount of computing power because the structures are so fine. But it can't be that we must know every single element of every single neuron in order to understand how the brain works. But what we still lack is an overarching theory that allows us to bring together the myriad observations we can make of the brain into a coherent story. When it comes to the narrative of how the brain works, we're still simply chipping away at the surface. We're still in the introduction. We're still introducing the cast of characters. We have not got the primary plot device yet, and we have no hope of a resolution. We're gathering data at a huge rate, but the fundamental processes that give rise to sleep, to memory, to emotion, and to the experience of the world that we all share is something that we're very far from uncovering as yet.